Stepping inside, he looked about the main foyer, illuminated by 10 candles of various sizes in glass jars. It was too dark to see much, but he was able to tell that it was at least 4 times the size of his entire bedroom at home, and very old. Above one of the candles he could see that painting was hanging, but it was too far away to see the details. The floor creaked underneath his careful footsteps as he moved closer to it, unaware of a silent shadow creeping up on him from the side. Falling back on an old habit, he chewed his fingernails nervously, and when he was close enough to tell that it was a portrait of a man, the shadow spoke.
Hello.
"Ah!" Tony blurted out in shock and spun around with his back to the painting and his face to the mysterious person's silhouette. He stared for a moment at the shadow and was about to speak when it made a slight movement and he could hear a match being struck. Now he could see that in its left hand a candle lamp hung low as the ring on its base was close to the person's knuckles.
Yes?
Taking the match and holding it vertically, the stranger ignited the wick of the candle and then blew out the match as the lamp brightened the room enough that he could see her face, had he been looking. Instead, one of his arms was outstretched as if to ward her away while the other protected his face. "Please don't eat me! I'm not as nutritious as I may seem!" he cried as he braced for terror. With disdain clear on her face, the woman rose an eyebrow in confusion.
Beg your pardon.
Finally realizing that she wasn't attacking, Tony wiped some sweat off his brow with his right arm. "Oh, you're just a girl. Phew," he said, and the woman's nose and eyebrows twitched. Her right hand wrapped around her hip as her left formed a fist while rotating the lamp almost enough to spill its melting wax.
Just a girl?
Suddenly Tony regretted having said that. He regretted having come to the manor as well. In fact, he regretted having been born and was quite certain that, whoever this woman was, she was going to do terrible things to him to make sure that he would be regretting it even more than he was now. As he flinched from her seething, shaking body, she finally calmed. Her left brow raised and a smug and mischievously large grin grew on her face. Her right hand stroked her chin lightly, and looking at her eyes again, Tony could tell that they were screaming trouble at him.
Oh, wait, you're here for the job opening, aren't you?
Grinning and relaxing, he pointed to himself with his left thumb. "I sure am. I'm the man you're looking for,"
Really?
the woman said, her tone and posture shifting to show her disbelief. Raising his left arm as if taking a pledge, he pressed on. "I can do anything you need. Just give me the tools and watch me go." The woman smirked.
I think I'll be the judge of that. But first...
she said as she extended her right arm, palm open and up, toward a hallway he could barely make out earlier in the shadows. The candlelight reflected on what appeared to be an antique chandelier and the glass of a few old-fashioned lamps hanging from the walls. A few portraits and paintings were also down the hall, but despite being able to see these flourishes representing the wealth of the manor's owner, all he felt was a buzzing at the back of his head, a thought screaming out in his mind, saying, "Leave this place immediately, you idiot!" Ignoring the voice as best he could, he heard the woman finish her sentence.
Won't you come inside for the grand tour?
Seeing the glee on her face at his nervousness, Tony inched back towards the door. I think I'll wait until daylight." The woman scoffed and after a short bit tugged on one of his sleeves.
Don't be silly. There's nothing to fear,
she declared as she started dragging him after her, letting one of her feet shut the door that had still been ajar until now. "Why don't I believe you?" he muttered as she took him down the hall.
That is the main foyer.
She sounded like a tour guide on a pleasure cruise, or at least like the way that they did in movies. He had never been on one himself, so he had to guess that the directors knew what they were doing. Realizing he had let his mind wander again, he looked around and saw that the doorway was growing smaller behind him. Melodramatically, he put an arm to his forehead and cried out, "Goodbye, beautiful world!" They had only traveled for about 15 minutes when his anxiety returned.
Further along is the pool room, but you can see that later,
his guide told him, unaware of his darting eyes and thoughts. "I'm not scared, I'm not scared, I'm not scared, I'm not scared." Looking around, he saw large spider webs and even thought he spied a rat running on one of the crossbeams.
There are more interesting rooms to see first.
As she started leading him up the flight of stairs, their hands parted, and he was forced to keep his eyes on her or be lost in the darkness if she continued on without him. Her hips swayed back and forth, and her dress shifted, its wrinkles shifting black dunes across the desert of its surface, devoid of decoration. Her red hair bobbed lightly around her shoulders in stark contrast to his black plumage. They had walked for a distance already, but now he finally realized that she smelled like the tiger lilies his mother had been growing for the past few years. Seeing the shape of the woman in front of him slightly calmed his fear of the manor, but it increased his worry for the interview itself. Okay, so maybe I am scared, but he's not so bad at the moment, at least. As they reached the top of the stairs, however, the woman spun around, stopping a little too close to the last step. Before he had a chance to stop, he cried out in shock, then fell off balance and knocked her over with him, finally landing on top of her. He apologized. Sorry,
It's all right.
was her only reply at first. Tony was about to lean back and try to stand up when he realized what it was exactly that he had almost had his face nestled up against. Her face was in his peripheral vision, but his body remained frozen until she cleared her throat.
You mind getting off, though?
Oh, right. After doing so, he helped her up, while looking slightly off to the side, averting her gaze. The woman looked backwards slightly as she dusted off her posterior, and Tony let his eyes wander back to her chest level as he mumbled to himself. Watch yourself. Don't turn around so quickly. Turning her body again and looking up at him slightly, she closed her eyes as she started to speak to him once again.
Now, as I was saying, my name is Eve Bloodstone, and...
After she paused, Tony hummed and she crossed her arms.
Huh? I'm up here, you know.
Huh? What? Blinking in confusion, the youth looked up at her face as she sighed and put a hand to her forehead, looking down slightly.
Name?
Oh, Tony.
Tony. For future reference, don't stare. Ever.
Sorry. After a short bit of silence, she turned around and cleared her throat, putting a small distance between them. Holding her lamp high, she entered a room with double doors.
Let's just continue on with the tour then, shall we, Tony? This is the ballroom.
As he entered the room after her, he could see that there were several support pillars in the room, but it was still mostly empty. At the top of these pillars, small guardrails similar to the ones at the gate stared down at him. Moonlight streamed in from several windows, but not far enough to illuminate the entire ballroom. Charming. His eyes wandered again towards her shape.
Last time it was used.
Suddenly she stopped.
Are you staring again, Tony?
Only at the guardrails, ma'am. Which was technically true, since he had noticed her pause and crossed his arms behind his back as he stared at the hideous things.
Good man. Come along now.
As they exited the ballroom, she continued her speech, but thankfully it shifted gears. He was growing a bit tired of the tour.
Well, if you get the job, I'll let you look at the rest of the manor yourself. After I explained the various tasks needed to be done on each floor, of course.
Sounds good to me. He nodded. Eve smiled and walked over towards a small table which had a silver tray on top of it. On the tray was a silver bell.